afternoon, M365 Council, hosted by Orangutech. You may notice today I am in some sporting colors, the black and red. I have the unfortunate genetic condition of Leafs fandom that was passed down through generations to me. The Leafs lost on Saturday to the Senators, and so I had to make good on a bet with my team. So I have to wear a Sens jersey today. So I'm happy to be joining you from the nation's capital, home of the Ottawa Senators. I'm here at our office, Orangutech's office downtown here at Slater Metcalf, and happy to be joining you today along with Ian Taylor, who we have borrowed from SSC for today's council meeting. Who is Orangutech? A little bit of context. Many of you have already joined these council meetings before. We are a partner in digital transformation and really focusing on M365 and the Microsoft world. We understand the rollout and journey to M365 is not a straight line. There is no one size fits all for department. It's not a straight line, lots of lefts, lots of rights, lots of twisting roads. We host this council in order to provide perspectives, talk about challenges, lessons learned, and just to have discussions on M365 as we understand that everybody's journey is a little bit unique to that. Our mission is to create a community for our members to share M365 challenges, successes, insights, and next steps among public sector departments. This is an open forum to ask questions, to learn on what other departments or what other resources are seeing. And we want to create that community. So we have, again, like I said, Ian Taylor joining us from SSC today. If you have any questions, you could submit them through the Q&A. The Q&A is open. Please identify oneself when asking questions. Just helps for context and gives me someone that I can address when I ask that question. And please vote for questions that you see answered, and we'll do the Q&A at the end, so it will be continually monitored throughout the council meeting. If you wish to continue this conversation, please reach out. My email is right there. Please reach out directly to me. I can connect you with Ian, and we can talk about other digital transformation projects that you may have ongoing. Our site is there as well. So quickly, I will introduce our speaker today. Ian Taylor's joining us. He's currently at SSC. He has previous work at Agriculture, AAFC, ESDC, CDIC, PSAC, and NRC, to name a few. He's been at this for over 20 years in the M365 sphere, focused on SharePoint, but is also growing that M365 stack in Power Apps, Power Platform, as you'll see today. Ian's been focused on SharePoint and IM solutions, developing, delivering roadmaps across our clients, across government, focusing on M365 and how to do records management and information management in M365. He's a personal friend of many at Orangutech. We've worked closely for many years, and so I'm happy to introduce and throw it to Ian. So Ian, thank you for joining us today.
Perfect. Excellent. Thanks, Eric. I'm going to share my screen here. Is that coming through?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So what we're going to be talking about today is Docuverse. This is the SSC document management solution, and it's business-led and a governed IM ecosystem. So I'm going to be doing an introduction to Docuverse. What is it? What's the main concept? A little bit about SSC's story and background. Then we're going to go into the Docuverse Journey. So how did they roll it out? We did an enterprise rollout, and what does that look like, and some of the strategy and key steps that we used. The third item is our MART Provisioning Tool. So that's a self-service tool that allows users to request new sites, teams, and libraries using the templates that SSC has defined. And then last, I'm going to be going over some IAM concepts and governance frameworks. There's going to be high-level IAM concepts that we're looking to introduce. So let's jump into the story. So SSC's official corporate repository is GC Docs. But like most government departments, they also have M365, which was used heavily during the pandemic. And since then, they've deployed email, OneDrive, SharePoint Online, and Teams. Their Teams has grown to over 16 million documents, and their OneDrive holds about 40 million. SSC also has a few hundred SharePoint Online sites and a few Power Apps and Power Automate kind of scattered throughout their tenant. But these tools exist in isolation, okay? So they have GC Docs and they have SharePoint and Teams and OneDrive, and they're not really connected. There's no cohesive solution or unified information management, no lifecycle management. And so recognizing this gap, SSC launched their IAM modernization project with a clear goal. So they wanted to make M365 their new official corporate repository. But this project wasn't about replacing one tool with another. It's not a migration or a lift and shift project. It's about building an enterprise-wide cohesive solution where information is managed and governed. The main drivers for SSC behind this is the fact that they already had an M365 tenant with E3 and some E5 licenses in place. And so that gave them lots of storage, gave them access to a rich ecosystem of tools in M365. And as we all know, M365 also includes advanced governance tools such as Purview, offering them e-discovery, records management, compliance, and information protection. What makes M365 even more compelling is how rapidly it's evolving. So Microsoft is continually improving its ecosystem with cutting-edge innovations in areas like AI. And additionally, they have tools like Power Apps and Power Automate, which allows for streamlined business process automation and custom app development without having advanced coding skills. So in short, the shift to M365 was about maximizing what SSC already has, eliminating the need to pay for additional tools, and creating a unified ecosystem that integrates their collaboration, their governance, automation, and AI-driven innovation. And that's really where Docuverse comes in. So it's a concept focused not just on simply migrating or doing a lift and shift of GC Docs into a single tool like SharePoint, but it's on building a managed and governed ecosystem that works across SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, email, and other tools. So let's talk a little bit about what Docuverse is. So it's the idea of a service that IAM offers out to the rest of the department, and it's the concept of a managed and governed information. So let's look at some of the key pillars that we have here. First, we have the enterprise model. So we started our enterprise model by defining 4 of our primary apps, which are Teams, SharePoint Online, OneDrive, and email. We defined OneDrive as the location for content you want to work on alone or for limited collaboration with a few people before moving it to Teams or SharePoint. Teams, we defined as a collaborative workspace enabling you to share and work on content with a specific group of people, mostly for things like projects and work initiatives. SharePoint, we defined as the official corporate repository, and that's where we want users to store, share, and collaborate on content within their business unit and beyond. We're applying lifecycle management to these tools to help drive this proper usage and these definitions, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the IAM portion of the presentation. As part of the enterprise model, we also define templates for sites, teams, and libraries. So we have a catalog of templates that's offered through our tool. And this is supported, all of these templates are supported by enterprise metadata and taxonomies to make sure that everything's consistent and governed across the organization. The second pillar of Docuverse is the organized structure. Okay, so we have kind of 2 halves here. We have business-owned sites, and then we have functional sites or record hubs. For the business-owned sites, obviously they're owned by the business, but they're set up to mimic the org structure. So we have branch hubs, directorate hubs, division sites, and it follows that organization structure. So it makes it intuitive and user-friendly for users in day-to-day operations. They can navigate around, they understand where they fit in that structure. And the idea is that the businesses own and manage their own sites and content using our enterprise templates and metadata. So Docuverse has site and team templates and a library catalog, and business lines can create those templates and use them within the sites that they manage. Content that's business specific or unique to that business stays in place on those sites with no forced retention. However, we do have disposition rules to help clean up content after a certain period. Then on the other side, we have functional sites, which act as centralized repositories for enterprise critical content like HR, legal, finance. And these are tightly governed to ensure compliance and lifecycle management, and content that is on the business-owned sites that are deemed enterprise critical get identified and moved to the correct functional site where they can be managed by the responsible parties. So this allows for enterprise permissions. You can do further document processing, maybe additional metadata, and of course, lifecycle management. The third pillar that we have here is our self-service with MART. So that's the tool you've heard me mention a few times. It stands for M365 Application Request Tool, but we called it MART. And this is where we want to empower business units to create their own sites, teams, and libraries without having to be SharePoint experts. So this is done through the MART tool, which is built on Power Apps and Power Automate, and it is fully automated through Azure Automation. So we have a saying for Docuverse, which is built by the business for the business. So the business really leads this and takes accountability over their sites and teams and libraries. In addition to the MART tool, we also pre-provisioned the org structure for the business-led sites. So this way they're not starting from scratch. We create all the branch and directorate hubs, ADMO sites, DGO sites, and division sites, and then we hand them over to the business to further develop. And this was scripted through the MART tool and took us about a week to roll this out across the enterprise. Finally, we have training and support. So to make Docuverse successful and sustainable, we provide a robust learning portal that the concept is self-led training, okay? So it has things like playbooks, videos, quick reference guides, FAQs, and this is complemented by a community of practice, a Docuverse community of practice, where we share best practices, we do training in there, business units share their experiences, suggest improvements, and identify any gaps in the existing templates or structures. So these insights that we get from the community of practice are then fed back into the Docuverse team, allowing us and the IAM team to enhance our catalog of templates, metadata, and tools available to Docuverse. And lastly, we also have a dedicated IAM support team, ensuring that users have the knowledge and help that they need to succeed. So that's kind of what Docuverse is. So what I'm going to talk about now is the journey that SSE went on for rolling out Docuverse. So typically, when you're rolling out an IAM system like this in SharePoint or some other solution, it's done business line by business line, which takes a lot of time and resources. But with Docuverse, we took a different approach. So what we did is we leveraged our pre-provisioned sites. We had an organized structure. So we knew that for the business sites, we wanted to do branches, directorates, divisions. We wanted to follow that org structure. And because of the MART tool and other scripting, we were able to pre-build all of these sites. And that allowed us to quickly deploy it across the entire organization. So this means that every business line gets access to a consistent starting point without waiting for a sequential rollout. And once deployed, business lines use the community of practice and the self-led learning portal to ramp up and mature their sites and teams. So this approach is not only faster, but it's cost efficient. It avoided redundant efforts and maintained consistency throughout our enterprise model, our standardized templates, and our MART provisioning tool. This rollout was possible to do this because we started with a minimal viable product, or an MVP, and then we build onto that MVP with a maturity model. So the vision was to provide a basic structure. Okay, so we have our branch, directorate, and division sites. Then we empower the business lines to expand those sites with more sites and teams and libraries and the support that we provide. And through MART, they can add all of those very quickly and easily. So that gets business lines up and running quickly, but also allows us to then crowdsource improvements. So by having everybody up and running and trained and using those, when we meet in the community of practice, we can crowdsource that across a bunch of different business lines and have those conversations right away. And that allows us to identify gaps in our templates, metadata, and processes that we can refine over time. And by onboarding quickly, we can move beyond just the structure, just the initial onboarding, and start working on the more exciting aspects of Docuverse, which are things like business apps, process automation, and AI, sorry. And then the last step of our Docuverse journey is really making business lines accountable and self-led. So business lines take ownership of their content and site structure. They are given site owner permissions for their sites. And while IM provides the tools and templates and support through their self-service with MART, the learning portal, business lines can kind of grow and mature their sites and teams at their own pace while contributing to the overall improvement of the system. So this approach ensures that we're just not rolling out a tool, but we're creating a system that evolves with the organization's needs, enabling us to scale efficiently and deliver long-term value. Now, to do this journey, to support all of this, we had to identify some new roles. So we have 3 key roles here. We have an IM business broker, a site owner, and an IM portfolio manager. So the IM business brokers are kind of like the guides or the representatives for their directorates and business areas. So they're the connectors between the business units and the central IM team. Their primary goal is to guide the business area in adopting Docuverse, maintaining a clear vision and structure. They work with their peers and management to understand their business area's content needs. They provide recommendations and help plan strategies. Also, this is the role, the IMBBs, who can approve site and team requests in the MART tool. So instead of having a centralized IT group where all of your roles go to who are not really familiar with that business line, it's actually the IMBBs that get the requests from their business area, and then they think, okay, is this matching our vision and our content planning? And if it does, then they're approving it. And then the MART tool goes ahead and creates it. The other role that we have here are site owners. So like I said, we did give business line site owner access, but they are responsible for the day-to-day management of their business-led SharePoint sites. So they ensure that the content's well organized and they follow our best practices. They're also responsible for managing permissions, customizing any navigation on the sites, and they are also going to go into MART and request new sites or teams. They can also request libraries. And site owners play a key role kind of working with the IMBBs to make sure that their site structures and teams are aligned with Docuverse best practices. And the last role that we have here is the IM portfolio managers, or the IMPMs. And this is the centralized IM support team. So they serve as the backbone of the Docuverse strategy. IMPMs work closely with both the IMBBs and the site owners to provide support. They identify gaps and make sure there's continuous improvement. They're really responsible for developing new metadata, library templates, site and team templates, and they lead discussions with the business areas on retention policies and disposition strategies, making sure that the content aligns with the org governance requirements. They're key, really, to maintaining consistency across the organization. So in short, the IMBBs kind of guide the business areas. Site owners are the hands-on doers and helpers that take ownership of the sites, and the IMPMs ensure that the whole ecosystem evolves and stays aligned with the organizational needs. I'm going to touch on, before I show you a demo of the Docuverse site here at SSC, I want to talk a little bit about the community of practice. So In the previous slides, we focus on the technology and the structure of the Docuverse, but technology alone isn't enough for our adoption. So really, these are our two key points. So the community of practice is attended by both the IAM business brokers and site owners. And our first 8 sessions that we're doing in the community of practice is to help the attendees mature their pre-built hubs and sites. So we give them their pre-built hubs and sites. They're coming into the COP, and we're running sessions to show them how to do things like content planning, how to add libraries and lists, how to set up permissions, and also engaging our copy service, which is a service that IAM offers to get content from GC Docs copied into Docuverse. After those initial sessions, the community of practice is really evolving into a collaboration space for crowdsourcing ideas, identifying gaps in our templates or processes, sharing best practices, and troubleshooting common challenges. So we're trying to create a culture of continuous improvement and ensuring that business lines feel supported while they take ownership of their self-led and accountable content and sites. And the last thing here is the learning portal. I already touched on this, but it is the idea of it is here that there's self-led. It has content like playbooks, videos, how-to guides, and it really allows business lines and users to move at their own pace because they can go as fast or slowly based off of the content that's in the site. So together, the COP and the learning portal is really the foundation of our support model. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a little show and tell and walk you through some key parts. Just give me a second here to flip over. So this is what our Docuverse sites look like. Oh, sorry, it's on the wrong monitor. Sorry. So this is what our Docuverse sites look like. And I'm just going to point out a few key things here. So up here, we have our Docuverse breadcrumb. Now, this was a custom build by the Docuverse team. For anybody here that's got a technical background, this is an SPFX app that we've deployed here. And what it does is it tells users where they are, okay? So we had this structure of branch hubs, directorate hubs, and division sites underneath, but what SharePoint doesn't give you is a way to understand where you are in that hierarchy while you're navigating through it. So we built this. So this is actually a hub, a branch hub, digital services branch. And underneath this is a directorate, strategic business planning and oversight. And that's the site that I'm on now. Some other things I want to point out are our hub navigation. So this is a hub navigation. And for those that have used hub sites before, what this means is that if I have a hub site and 10 sites underneath it or connected to that hub site, this navigation stays across all of those sites. So as I navigate around this in this area, this hub nav will remain consistent. So like a parent navigation. What we decided is we landed on 4 first level headers that we want consistent. So every time you build a new Docuverse site, these are the links that appear on the hub. We have our spaces, and this is really to link to other document repository sites underneath this directorate or branch. We have services and functions, which is where if that business area offers services and functions out to the rest of SSC, this is where they can put links to that or information about it. Committees and governance, if they're leading or running committee or governance bodies or even participating in them, anything that's related to this branch, they can have links here, and projects and initiatives. Now, this is one of our early adopters. You can see that they have our spaces and the other areas aren't filled out. And this goes back to the point about this being business-led and moving at their own pace, starting from a basic structure, an MVP, and then maturing. So these areas have built out their document repository sites, but they haven't quite yet matured into building out the rest of their navigation. Some other things to point out here is that we did a little bit of branding. Docuverse SharePoint sites aren't the only sites in SSC's tenant. They have some custom app sites and other things. We wanted to help users be able to distinguish between these sites. So Docuverse has a logo here. That's this logo and then a background banner. And the colors that you see here are the SSC official colors. So all the buttons when you're in a library and stuff are following all of SSC's colors. So that's from a theme that we deployed to this site. All right, from the content here, when we first build out or pre-build the sites, we do start with a landing page template, and we give business owners and encourage them to create kind of cool, fun-looking landing pages. So what this group has done, they kind of list out a little bit about them, who their DG is, some other key contacts. They've also talked about some of their key groups here. So this directorate has business branch planning, service strategy, integration services, and user experience groups. So they have links to all these areas. And right over here, we have site owners, which is on our homepage or landing page for every site, so that you know who to contact if you have any issues. Okay, I'm going to pop in. If you see here from our hour spaces, you can see here that they have a DGO office, and then they have a few division Docuverse sites here. If I click on their DGO office, just to give you an idea as to what type of content, this allows a group to centralize certain content across a directorate. And that's why we built a DGO office site. So all these divisions, they all do a little bit of HR, they do a little bit of finance. It's not their primary service or the reason why they exist at SSC. They're doing business branch planning and strategy and user experience, but they have to do some finance, some HR, some other stuff. So what this group has decided to do is, instead of having that content spread out across all these other sites, they said, no, we want to centralize it in our DGO office. And we're finding a lot of our business units are doing the same thing. You can see here they have a task planner, they have their procedures and guidelines, they're tracking some vacations, mandatory training. And if I show you the document libraries, this is the site navigation, and every time you provision a document library through MART, it shows up automatically under document libraries. And by the way, this works in both English and French. I happen to be on an English profile here. If I switched over to a French profile, everything you're seeing here would show in French. So the breadcrumb, the hub nav, and this navigation. And these are the libraries that they have. They have some administration libraries that they're managing their finance and HR and comms. And then they have a few other libraries for work initiatives and policies, employee and resource management. So that kind of gives you an idea of what a DGO site would look like. If I pop into another division site, I'm not going to spend much longer on this. This is what a division site would look like. They've added a list over here. They have an M365 adoption maturity scorecard, and they have their own libraries within this business area where they're storing content for this business unit. And you can see they spend a bit of time making their landing page look nice. They have some links to key items that they want people to use. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of a look and feel as to what we've done for Docuverse, the custom breadcrumb app. If I want to get out of here, I can click back and get back to my directorate. If I want to click back to the branch hub, I can do so. So this breadcrumb lets me know where I am, and I can get back and forth. We have a consistent hub nav, and this is kind of the look and feel of Docuverse. So just let me pop back here to the deck. All right. Not quite. Here we go. Okay, so that kind of sums up what is Docuverse, what was the journey, gave you a little look and feel demo as to what Docuverse looks like. And now I want to talk a little bit about the MART app, and I'm going to show you what that looks like and give you a demo. So, the MART app is our M365 provisioning tool that's integral to Docuverse. And so what I want to talk about is the fact that it's built on M365. So this point is key because MART isn't a third-party solution. It's fully built on Power Apps, Power Automate, and Azure Automation, which are all out-of-box tools that are part of the M365 ecosystem. So this means there's no need for lengthy security reviews or procurement processes. It's also an open, customizable system that developers can enhance to meet evolving needs. And it's not closed or proprietary software. So MART allows full access to its workflows, the apps itself, the scripts that are in Azure Automation for modification and improvement. Of course, the MART app is our self-provisioning tool. So it allows business lines to take ownership of their business area, of all their sites and teams and library requests. So they can submit requests without requiring extensive M365 expertise. What the MART does, it'll create those libraries, configure them, set up the views for them. Same thing with the different sites. So those are all fully configurable through the templates. When you submit a request, and I'll show you in the MART tool in a second here, the approval goes to the IMBBs, so they do have control over which sites and teams are approved and gets created within their area. And the process is fully automated. So once it's approved, that kicks off workflows that then uses Azure automation to go ahead and build everything according to the templates and the configuration that SSC wanted. Making this very quick and efficient. Sites and teams show up in about 20 minutes. Libraries show up in about 5 minutes after they're requested. The other thing about the MART tool is that it's very flexible. Okay, so the tool that I'm about to show you is the version for SSC. You'll notice that they have their colors. They have some different graphics there, and all the templates, names, and some of the metadata that's in the MART tool, that was all based off of their requirements. And the same thing with the backend, with the Azure automation script, they have a list of requirements of settings that they wanted on their sites and teams and libraries, and that's what the MART does in the background. It builds all of that, so that way it's consistent and standardized across all the business units. The other thing that's really important here is how MART integrates with Purview and Search. What I mean by that is there's a special type of metadata that you can do and attach to sites and teams, and they're called property bags. And some of you here might have explored those, but you can use them to say, okay, what business unit owns this site or team and all the content inside it. You can also say, what is the purpose of this site? Is it a repository? Is it an information site, a sandbox, an archive site? If it's a team, is it for a project or work initiative or a community of practice? And this is important because by MART doing that for you and attaching those property bags, this integrates with Purview. And for those of us that have played around in Purview, in order to push out policies, you have two types of scopes. You have static scopes and adaptive scopes. Static scopes are pretty manual and they have a bunch of limitations. So you would say, I want to push this set of policies out to SharePoint sites, or I want to push this set of policies out to teams. But you actually have to tell it which sites or teams you're pushing those policies out to. Also, there's limitations. For sites, you can only do 100. If it's a users, I think the limit's around 1,000 per scope. Whereas with adaptive scopes, those limitations don't exist. You also don't have to manually maintain these scopes. So when you're trying to push out a set of policies that you want for certain sites or teams or users, it's all handled for you dynamically. And that's where the property bags come in. So if you've provisioned your sites and teams and you know who the business authority is, you know what the purpose is of that site or team, then you can target those policies specifically to those sites or teams or users. And that can be handled for you without limitations and without manual intervention using adaptive scope. So that's really the power of why a provisioning tool like MART is so important. All right, and also for the upcoming features, I'm going to demo MART 2 and you'll see it's mostly a provisioning tool, but what we're working on now is reporting so that you can give reports up to leadership around which business authorities are using it, what libraries are they requesting, which ones haven't used it, because this is business led and they can move at their own pace. It's important to be able to track that and understand the adoption and be able to report onto that and deal with it appropriately. Also, we're looking at layering on auditing, and this is focused on IM audits so that the MART tool will be able to go into your SharePoint sites or teams, tell you how many files they have, which files have retention labels, or do you have site owners, have they completed their training, or do you have no site owners or too many site owners? So really auditing your sites and your Docuverse sites and teams based off of your IM kind of goals and visions here. And the last thing we're looking to layer on into MART is automated operational tasks. So MART is great at creating your sites and teams and libraries, but what it's not doing currently is after it's created, there's some tasks that you might want to be able to automate instead of having to raise a ticket and wait days for that turnaround time. Maybe changing your business authority or changing your hub site association, things like that. Okay, so without further ado, just let me get back to my browser here and I'll show you the MART. I did not have this link ready. I apologize. I should have had this popped up. I'm going to go to the learning portal and then I'm going to go to the MART. Just give me a sec here. I'm going to open up the MART tool. So this is the live demo. Hopefully Murphy's Law doesn't kick in here and something gets funny. All right, so this is what the MART tool looks like. It's just loading here. As you can tell, they have some graphics and some SSC colors. All this text is fully customizable in English and French. So it's fully dynamic. None of it's hard-coded. It's all looked up. You can change the language and use it in French. There's some quick links here to request a new site or team, request a library, and workspace requests. If I'm an IMBB, which I am, I see that there's 3 here that people have submitted that are waiting for review. On the left here, I have my navigation. I can open this out and see exactly what this is. So let's get to something fun. Let's create a new request. So if I click here, it's going to ask me, okay, what kind of request do you want? And it's telling me definitions to try to help guide me here as to which one. So I'm going to start with a SharePoint site. And these are the templates that are inside the MART. So we have a document repository. And what does that mean? We have an information site, a hub site, a sandbox, and an archive site. So these are the different types of sites that you can create. I'll just click on document repository just to show you what filling out a request looks like. And I don't want to actually submit this because this is in production at SSC. But let's say English name. If I'm not sure what this is, we're using information pop-ups here for tooltips. French name, and description. Okay, once all of this is filled out, I can go to next. And this is some of the property bags and other configuration I was talking about. So I have to pick a business authority. So every single site and team that I create at SSC has an associated business owner with that site. And this helps for e-discovery. It helps if you're looking for disposition approvals. And it just helps if you're copying or moving files around your tenant and different sites. Where did that file come from? That metadata is part of our core metadata, and that's going to come with it. So if I look at the values here, I can select a branch. If I pick, I don't know, it doesn't matter. I can pick project management branch here, and then I can pick, this is an ADM level, a DG, or they have their directorates separated into portfolios. And click save. So now I've picked my business authority. For site owners, it says I need a minimum of 2. So hopefully I'm in here. All right, so this is me, and I'm going to use one of our team members here as a second one. And if I didn't like that selection, I can just exit out. So it's very user friendly. And I have to pick an associated hub site. So every site is always connected. We don't want any islands or silos within Docuverse. Everything is connected so we can have consistent navigation. Users don't have to bookmark. I mean, of course, they can bookmark their own business unit sites, but they should be able to navigate around as well without having to do bookmarks and know where everything is. So I'm just going to pick corporate secretariat for this example. And I don't want to click submit here because this will actually submit this. So I'm just going to cancel. That was the site. I'll show you teams quickly. So if I look at teams, there are different templates here. And I'm going to talk about why we have these different templates when I get to the IM portion coming up next. But we have project and work initiative, professional groups and engagement, and informal collaborations. Very similar process. I click here, I fill out the forms, pick the team owners, and away it goes. For libraries, we have a library catalog here that's organized into different categories. So if I look at financial management services, we have these 2 templates, financial planning and budgeting and financial reporting and budget reviews. It tells me what these are for. If I want more info about this template, I can click here, and this brings me to the learning portal where we have our whole catalog of libraries. And if I want to add it to my site, it comes up here. I get a chance, an opportunity here to rename it. So it's already pre-filled with the template name, but I can always rename it here and add it to the cart. So I can add a few of these to the cart. And when I'm ready, I can go here and review my requests. It's going to show me my cart, and I still have a chance to edit this or delete this library. And the last thing I have to do is I have to tell it which site I want these libraries to be created on. It's important to know that I can't do this if I'm not an owner of this site, okay? So I can't go to somebody's random site and add a bunch of libraries. I have to be listed as an authorized person for that site in order to create libraries. For approvals, this is what approval looks like. As an IMBB, you come in here, you see this information, somebody's requested it, and you can filter it if this list is long. If I open up this approval, I can look through the request, make sure that everything's okay. As the IMBB, if I don't like something or need to change it, I can edit it or delete, and then I can approve or reject this request. If I reject it, there's email communications that go out to folks so that they know. If I approve it, that starts the provisioning process, which are, again, Azure automation scripts that go ahead and build everything and configure everything the way you need to. And the last thing I'll show you here is the browse. So once all these site and teams are created, I can browse through these, look at the information, get the URLs for them. I can filter this, search them. And if I click on one to look at it, this is where some of our operational tasks and reporting and audits are going to be. So this is for future releases, so I can perform operational tasks on these sites or teams. Okay, so that's about it. I know I went fairly quickly there. What is the time check? How am I doing? 3:11. Okay. All right, so let's pop back to the deck here. And this is over 3:30, right, Eric? So I want to leave about 15 minutes.
Yeah, 3:30 your time. We got about 3 or 4 minutes, give or take here, Ian.
Okay, all right. I'm going to go cover some IAM concepts. So first thing I want to cover here is the idea of generic policies versus specific labels. So generic policies, think of those as kind of like baseline controls or default rules for larger portions of your content. So that might be for an app like Teams or Team Chat or email, and you're trying to apply this policy to all the content in SharePoint or your email. So it's a generic policy. The other idea, and I'm going a little bit faster through these because I'm running out of time here, and my apologies, is specific labels. And so the concept here is that you can set up a generic policy for, let's say, SharePoint to say, let's dispose files 2 years after last modified, but then you can assign certain files or libraries specific labels. And what that means is that those specific labels will override your generic policies. And the reason why we want to do this is because if you are pushing out Docuverse and we have templates and this great governance process, but users who have site owner access to their sites are still going ahead and using out-of-box libraries or creating kind of these rogue libraries, and they're putting all their information in those libraries instead of your IAM approved, governed, consistent metadata libraries, you want to be able to deal with that. And so your generic policies can handle that content. So if it does not have a label and we don't know what it is, then it's getting a 2-year after last modified disposition rule. If we do know what it is, that's because we have a specific label applied to it. And that allows it to follow an actual defined life cycle. Maybe we're sending it to the record center. Maybe it's staying on the business site, but getting disposed after 2, 5, 7 years. Okay, so with that concept in mind, I'm just going to quickly go over high level the concepts of email. So email, we want it as a comms tool, not a personal repository. So really what we're looking at setting up is a generic policy of an inbox disposal 2 years after last modified. And there's two folders here, deleted folders and sync issue folders, that can easily be forgotten if you're not aware of them. And they can actually pile up to a lot of storage in your tenant. So it's recommended that you do set a 30-day disposition generic policy for these folders. And then for email, there are no additional labels. So the idea is that users would know that their emails are disposed 2 years after last modified unless they take an action. So that action would be moving them to an appropriate repository such as SharePoint, Teams, or OneDrive. And this is where a tool like Harmony can really come and help. It can tie all your email into OneDrive and SharePoint and Teams. Users can drag and drop emails right into SharePoint or OneDrive or Teams from their Outlook tool, and that kind of helps you tie it all together. For OneDrive, we want OneDrive to be a personal workspace, but we don't want it to become a de facto corporate repository where that content should be in SharePoint. So really the policies that we're looking at here is, again, a generic policy to say we're going to dispose content 2 years after last modified. However, in this situation, we would provide additional labels for some content that makes sense to keep. So users would have to take action here. They'd have to, inside their OneDrive, they would have to apply this 10-year keep for 10-year label so that their content's not disposed. And we're hoping, because it's a manual action, that it won't lead to misuse of this label, because users have to actually take a step here to keep it for longer. And for teams, we have generic policies for our 3 different team types. So informal collaboration team, this is just for chats and some files for a business unit. We're looking to dispose documents 6 months after last modified. For professional groups and engagement teams, so that's communities of practice and social network teams, we're looking to dispose documents 2 years after last modified, because based off of the purpose of the team, we think that content should stick around for longer. And for project and work initiatives, we actually don't touch the content while the project is active. Projects and work initiative teams have a start and end date. So when the project is over or the work initiative is complete, that's when we'll move this team into archive, which means it'll be read only, and we keep it there for 2 years in case you still need access to that content or you have a whoopsie moment. You can unarchive that team. But after the 2 years, the entire team gets disposed. So that means your chats, your planner, your files, all of that is gone. And business users are told that they have to take artifacts from that team and move it into the appropriate SharePoint repository to keep it for longer. And labels, they have none. Now, I do apologize because I know I'm out of time, and I had 2 slides left, which was SharePoint, where we combine generic policies and labels. And I had one other slide talking about how to get it and talking more about the Records Hub and how that all works. So I apologize that I am running out of time here. I do know, and maybe Eric, I don't know if it's part of your closing, I think Orangutech is having me come in beginning of April, and I think they're thinking about an event where I'll be made available for 2 or 3 hours and can have a little bit of a calmer, better paced conversation if you want to go into more details about Docuverse and this architecture and how it works.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Yeah, we're still in the initial planning stages to have you out in April, but that is the plan. So we will, again, the council will hear from us when we have more of a set plan for that. We got a lot of questions, Ian, quite a bit of engagement. I know, shocker. So I'm going to start. I still have a few to get through in review side. So again, please be patient as I work through these. We might go a little bit over time so we can hit on most of these. We have the most upvoted question from Sunny. What are the plans for GC Docs at SSC? And I don't know if, Ian, you can sort of comment on that bigger picture, but what are the plans for GC Docs?
So that's a great question. And to be honest, we haven't 100% landed on that, simply because we have litigation holds with some of the current cases that everybody here is aware of that has a lot of content on hold. So what we do is right now we're getting people up and running with Docuverse and trained and building out their structure, and we offer them a copy service. So that's if they have to move more than a few hundred files, we can map it and get that copied into Docuverse so they can go about their business. For the content that's there, we're leaving GC Docs. We're not ready to shut it down yet because we know we have to deal with the files that aren't under litigation hold. The idea is that we're going to let it follow its life cycle. So that being 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, and then the stuff that is on litigation hold, we haven't gotten to that point. So sorry, I know that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but that's where we're at, and that's the truth.
Thank you, Ian. I did just publish a question from Sue Ann. Among the same vein you touched on it, what would happen to files relating to a litigation hold? So you did touch on that real quick. We'll just stay in the same ballpark here.
Yeah, for sure. So in GC Docs, if it's on litigation hold, we're not touching that right now. There's some very stiff requirements. I have done some litigation hold migrations of content, and there's definitely some stiff requirements around proving that it's the exact file. You keep all the metadata exactly, and it's a bit more involved than a regular copy service or migration project. And happy to talk about more details about a litigation migration that I've done before. Now, for content that's in M365, SSC is actually using the e-discovery tool. So they're not doing the manual custodian thing where you send information out and you have custodians tuck this stuff away. They are using the e-discovery tools and functionality and features, which is how we're putting things on hold to stop any disposition within Docuverse.
Great. Thank you, Ian. Another question from Sunny. Lots of questions from Sunny. Keep them coming, Sunny. The question is, will SSC share the learning portal and resources with other government departments in the near future on GC Exchange? And we had Jenny Thompson from DFO also comment on that question, wondering the same thing, specific to plan, challenges, lessons learned.
Yeah, for sure. So SSC actually runs a tech board, not a tech board. I'm trying to remember what it's called now. That committee where that Jeff Braybrook and some of you guys might, some of you folks here might know that, where he gets all the departments together and they share things. And it's not a problem to start showing the learning portal, some of the resources. It's been developed in English and French. The learning materials. We have some great graphics on using the right app for SharePoint and Teams and some great lessons learned. So I'm sure it's absolutely not a problem. Just reach out to SSC and or if you're attending those sessions by Jeff Braybrook, I'm sure it can be posted there and we can sort you out.
Great, thank you, Ian. And again, Orangutech's here is a resource as well. We can connect to with architects that are doing many a lot of this same work, including Ian. Sunny asked, how much metadata is pre-populated in a site / document libraries? And what is the responsibility of end users for metadata?
Okay, another great question. I love Sunny. He's like on point with these questions. Okay, so it's a great question. So I briefly talked about property bags that the MART creates and attaches to the sites and teams. Some of those metadata actually pre-populates inside the document libraries and documents. So that would be like which business owns this content. So that's pre-populated. The other thing that we do is we take advantage of doc sets and library default settings and folder default settings. So if we have a financial planning library and we have quarters and fiscal years, we can actually pre-configure those libraries to default. So when the user is putting documents inside those folders, it gets auto-tagged with the right fiscal year and quarter. But doc sets is another big one. Okay, so a lot of people use collections of information like an employee collection or a policy collection or so on and so forth, a facility, an OHS incident, and we create doc sets for this purpose. So you enter in, the user enters in the metadata once, the policy ID or the employee number, whatever it is, fiscal year, and then all the documents that go inside that document set just inherit that metadata. So we're really using location-based inheritance for now. And the last bonus point, because I can see Eric is like, stop talking, Ian, we're out of time. the last bonus point here is when we do pick up documents and move them to the centralized sites, one of the things I said in the slide is about further document processing. So SharePoint Syntex, which is called SharePoint Advanced now, they've rebranded it, does have document processing where you can take out information from the documents and pre-populate the metadata so your users don't have to do it. And that's really cool because they got rid of their original licensing model. Now you can pay per transaction or per processing. Same thing with their electronic signatures and stuff. So what you can do is you don't want to configure this across 1,000 sites. What you can do is say, hey, here's invoices. Let's move this to this central place, and now let's run our document processing on this one library with all the invoices and pull out that metadata for that users didn't fill in. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking there. I hope that answered your question.
Great, thank you, Ian. Another big upvoted and thumbs up question from Hannah. If I'm understanding correctly, enterprise critical information records are moved from business sites to the functional sites for retention and disposition.
Yeah.
What role, if any, do users play in identifying records that need to be moved? Do they have to create them in certain libraries, tag them with metadata, move the records themselves, something else?
Yeah. So right now, SSC is using a location base, which is the same thing that GC Docs uses, another records management tool. So we do have so by location based, I mean, we have a MART tool with our library catalog, stuff for finance, stuff for HR, stuff for policies, things like that. So by creating those libraries and the users using those enterprise approved libraries, it's auto tagged with what retention labels and what content types they are. And so by doing that, we know which content we want to leave in place and which content we want to use. Is it 100% perfect? No, you do pick up some stragglers, but it's a lot better than asking your user community to identify all these records. So that's location based. Now, we do also have plans to move into more auto applications. So that would be through metadata rules. Like you said, maybe it's a status for superseded content. I don't know that the content's superseded until you change the status. Some of the more event-driven, meaning this employee's left the organization, or this contract is over. And then the last one, of course, is AI is the big one we want to get into with trainable classifiers, where it'll auto tag with that policy, that retention label for you. So right now we're at MVP stage, which is location based, but we do have plans to evolve.
Great, thank you, Ian. The questions keep rolling in. We're gonna probably go a little bit over time, but love the discussion. Brian asks, what is the best way for an organization to do a deep dive into the configuration you've applied into Docuverse? For example, permissions, taxonomy, site templates, MART. I assume that would go, like, we can coordinate that if they want to talk to you, Ian.
Yeah, so the way that I developed MART was to be flexible to your needs. So typically, I mean, I can certainly explain what some other organizations have done that have used it, but typically we would start with a kind of requirements or solution doc. There's some key parameters like what are the default member permissions you want? Do you want them to have edit or contribute? Do you want any branding or not? Do you want any extra permissions? What site features do you want? Do you want doc ID and things like that? So typically I would start there and go through the list of the common questions, and then that would determine what configuration the Azure automation scripts are doing for you. Also for your look and feel on the landing pages, that's done through a template. It's called a PMP template. It's an out-of-box supported. It's on Microsoft's docs. You can read about it. So you can actually create a site, set it all up, create libraries or lists, and when you're happy with it, you can run a PowerShell command that takes a snapshot of that site and turns it into a template. And that template can then be reused to be applied to any other sites that you create. But I'm sure, for myself, if I engage with a client, I can discuss common settings and questions and pros and cons, and then kind of go from there. But the MART solution in Docuverse is built based off of my architecture, and it's built to work and be flexible with other departments and requirements and settings and configuration.
Great, thank you, Ian. There's another question sort of in the queue here about packaging up MART and sending it over, and it doesn't seem as simple as just here's a plug and play, Power App. There's quite a bit of work behind the scenes to get this thing working and functional according to the business's needs.
Well, it's about the enterprise model that I talked about in the first slide, right? So what metadata do you want? What taxonomies do you? It's not going to be the same department to department because they might be similar, like fiscal year and quarter and stuff obviously is going to be the same. But there's other metadata like the business units. Maybe you have vendors or suppliers that you work with. And these are kind of like the taxonomies that you want to build out so that your users can tag the stuff. And that's going to be unique to each department. Also, the library catalog. I mean, I have about 30 that I kind of show departments when I first go in there, and then they say, yeah, this one we don't really need this, or we really need these two or three, because every department's different, right? Like Department of Agriculture is going to be different than a technology-based department and what their needs are. So it's not really like a pick up, plug and play, but it is a rapid deployment kind of thing as long as you can define your enterprise taxonomy or templates and a few configuration rules, and then you can go from there.
Great, thank you, Ian. A quick question. This is a quick one. It's yes or no.
Yes.
Do you require an E5 license to make this all work?
No. However, it depends on what you want to do with e-discovery and some of your disposition rules. So you are limited in some of your options and flexibility. You can totally do it on E3, but every department that I've worked with has opted to take that extra step and make the argument for E5. I've been kind of lucky that way, actually, because E3 definitely has some limitations there around the entire ecosystem and pushing out your policies.
Great, thank you, Ian. So we have another question. We are at time, so if you have to drop, if you have another meeting to get to, please do so. We're going to go through these questions, I think, because I'm really enjoying this discussion. We have a question from Alain. You may have answered this question partially. How is SSC applying governance and lifecycle management to information stored in Teams channel SharePoint sites? Is Teams channel site information automatically migrated in corporate SharePoint online sites when the team no longer serves a business purpose, expiry of temporary teams? I think you did touch on that, Ian, but I figured we can still tackle that one.
I went through, I was super rushed because I was running out of time. So what happened is we have a generic policy for teams that are evergreen, ongoing, so not project or work initiative teams. And that generic policy is actually a SharePoint policy, not a group or team policy. And the reason why it works is because our MART tool uses property bags, and I'm able to identify those teams because I've tagged them as teams, as evergreen teams, using that template. And the generic policy will say documents in the SharePoint site, because everybody knows there's a SharePoint site behind Teams. That's where the channel files are stored. And so it's a SharePoint policy that's pushed out, and that disposes of those files 2 years after last modified, 6 months, whatever your organization agrees upon. Now, for the team itself, that's the group object. So when I say that, teams are kind of like an iceberg. So on the top, you just see this team that you go into, but really you're having an email, a calendar, you're having planner, you have a SharePoint site. If you create private channels and share channels, those are additional SharePoint sites. So that's kind of like the entire object of that group. If the group is no longer needed, meaning the project is done, the work initiative is done, or the business says, I don't need this team anymore, then what we do is we apply a group policy to it for 2 years retention. So we archive it, so it's in read only. You can still access that information. If you have a whoopsie moment and need to bring that team back, it's not a problem. And so you got 2 years. And the idea is that you got 2 years to kind of get your primary artifacts and put them in your business-led sites for keeping your stuff you want to keep. And then after that 2 years, it's a group policy then that disposes the group. And I hope that's not confusing. So the first policy is a SharePoint policy that's applied to the site behind the team, and the second one is a group team policy that's applied to the team.
Okay, thank you, Ian. I got 4 more questions left. We have one from Matthew. Can you please provide a list, maybe not an exhaustive list, but a few of the retention triggers you're using in systems config, in a systems configuration sense to trigger the retention policy or rules? Is it last modified, from date created, etc.?
It's last modified almost all the time right now because, again, we're on our MVP and minimal viable product. Most of the business sites that we're doing, if it's not an enterprise content that we're moving to our record center, so I'm only talking about the business specific sites right now. We're not worried about forced retention because this is their content. They own it. It's deemed to have no enterprise value. It's specific to that business unit. We just leave it alone. So it stays in place on their site. They can delete it ahead of time if they want, but we're not forcing retention and creating extra copies in the preservation libraries and all that stuff. However, we know that if you leave it to the business sites, they will never get rid of anything. It was grow and grow and grow, and the risk goes up. So depending on the type of content and the purpose and the library it's in, we say, if this document hasn't been touched in, and we're keeping the labels really simple. It's like, keep for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, and that's it. It's not confusing with a long IM code and everything else where end users don't know what's going on, because this is on their business unit site, and technically they can see those labels and change them if they need to. So we're auto applying them. And then disposing the content after an agreed upon time, and that's agreed upon by the business, right? So the IM team works with the leaders of that business and decides what's an acceptable time, and those are the defaults. Now, if it's enterprise content, it's different. So that's getting separated out and coming into the record center, and those have different things, because some of those are superseded. Those triggers are a status change. Okay, so we have a status column that says, okay, this is superseded. That triggers that. So those are examples of metadata triggers. You also have time it was labeled. Okay, so the beautiful thing about doing this, and I didn't have enough time to get into this, but you can do multi-stage retention. So stage 1, think about that as being in the business-led site. And if it stays there, that's fine. Stage 1 is it. Now, if it's enterprise content, you can pick a period like 6 months after last modified. So if this is enterprise critical content, the business hasn't touched it in 6 months, I'm going to take it now and move it to the record center because I want different people managing it than the business folks. I want different permissions and stuff. So once we move it over, it depends on what type of content it is. So it could be stage 2, which means the trigger is from the time it was labeled. It could be based off of last modified date. It could be a metadata field like status if it's superseded, or event driven. I hope I answered your question. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough to boil it down. There's a lot of cogs in the machine.
Exactly.
Matthew asks another question. Within Docuverse implementation at SSC, has your governance framework taken into account export and transfer as part of lifecycle management? And if so, how mature is Docuverse in terms of readiness for that function?
So we're not ready for that at all. I'm actually working with another client who might get there a little bit faster, but what I'm suggesting right now, because I don't have all the requirements from LAC as the additional metadata they want, we don't have a mechanism as to how they want to send it over. And I'm assuming you're talking about Archives Canada when you say that for export. So what I'm suggesting is the extra stages. So stage 1 is in the business-led sites. If it goes to a record center, that's stage 2. It follows another retention period. And then when it's done, the organization's retention period, if it is archival, then I'm changing the label to stage 3 based off of that information. So stage 3 board meetings, maybe as an example. And so I know in Purview, I've played around with the, oh my God, I just blanked out as to what it was called. The content discovery. You can put together search queries, and that does allow you to export an Excel file of a list of just the files that meet that search criteria, or also the files themselves. And I can't believe I just blanked out onto the name of that function in Purview. Anyway, so what I'm doing is for now, until we have clear requirements and a mechanism, is saying let's at least label it with stage 3 or stage 4, whatever you need to label it as, so that we can separate that content out. And we can export it using that purview feature. And then later on, once we have clear instructions and requirements and a mechanism to send it over to LAC, then we can deal with it at that time.
Thanks, Ian. And I think you're right. Matthew's coming to us from LAC. So I think you were right on the button with the archives question there. So second to last one, Travis asks, the focus seems to be on prioritizing compliance activities for internal services, but not to focus on support lifecycle activities for the real business information, programs and services. How are you supporting business lines in their business matters as part of this initiative? How can non-experts in the business do this on their own?
Yeah, so this is part of the MVP and the life cycle that I talked about at the beginning. So when I go into an organization, I'm mostly working with an internal project team, and I am, right? So they don't know the business programs and they don't know the business content. And this is what I went over in the first couple of slides. So the point is to get this built and out there with a base set of library templates, team templates, site templates. Once this businesses are up and running and their end users are training, they're attending the community of practice and they're identifying these gaps. So at agriculture, they're very program based. So they actually had a separate template just for programs, and they had metadata for programs. So part of their core metadata was program. So we had an enterprise taxonomy that stated all the programs that they did at AFC, and every single document anywhere across their tenant could get tagged with that program. And then in advanced search, you can configure it so that you can search and filter and refine by documents by that program. So that was one way we did it. But we also had program-based sites where for a program you would go in, you could have a hub site for a program, and then different projects and services underneath that program would be connected sites up to that hub and have a centralized navigation. So at SSC, we're not quite there yet. They don't also run, I don't believe anyway, any programs that I'm aware of. But it is about that MVP. Same thing we did that at agriculture was MVP. We started talking to our clients, having that community of practice, and then they identify these gaps, and then we build out a structure and a taxonomy for them to manage that life cycle.
Great, thank you, Ian. And for the last question, I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball. You'll have to get back on your computer. Melanie asks, I know she's still on the line. Melanie asks, could you show when you switch it to another language that it changes to another language and how you did that?
So to switch to another language, and I'd be happy to do a separating talk to that, because I have to switch my profile, and sometimes it takes up to like a day for it to propagate through everything. So that's actually driven by your M365 profile preference, and my profile is in English. I can get a French profile person if you want to see this or have other meetings. That way I don't have to switch my profile, and they can show you that switches to French. All I can say is I promise you, because every department has official languages act, right? So we have to be able to pass those things pass that muster in order to push this out. So when you change your office profile, the breadcrumb changes, the hub nav, the metadata changes, the content type names. We did that when I deployed the object model. I deployed the content types in English and French, the site columns in English and French, the managed metadata taxonomies and the term store are all done in both languages, and the pages. So I promise you it changes, but I can't show you unless you want to wait for a day for it to kind of kick in.
Thank you, Ian. I knew that would be a bit of a curveball. Wanted to keep you on your toes right at the end. There's still a lot of questions about MART and about sort of your work, Ian. I would encourage everyone, please reach out. We're a bit over time, running out of time on this, so please reach out. My info is up on the screen here shortly. Dylan's gonna propagate it there. Yes, so please reach out to me or reach out to who you know at Orangutech, and we can set up a little bit more in-depth discussion about M365, the scope that your department has, and how MART may be a fit for you. So Ian, appreciate your time as always. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for putting that together, and I'm glad you were able to join despite all the snow out there today.
Yes, thank you. And I believe, Eric, that event, I know you don't have it perfectly planned or scheduled yet, but pretty sure I'm coming out to Ottawa beginning of April and be able to stick around for more hours because I'll be there for a few days instead of just like trying to jam it into 1 hour.
Yeah, we'll take up as much of your time as we can. So thank you, Ian. Appreciate it, of course. And thank you, Council, for joining. We'll be in touch as to the next meeting, and we do hope to see you soon. Thank you.
All right, cheers. Thanks, bye.